And so just some simple ground rules for meetings. If you're not talking, just go ahead and click the mute button at the bottom left of Zoom, just so there's no background noise. If you guys have any questions, pop it in the chat box in Zoom or in Slack. If you want to type anything in, or and I'll give you a chance to talk throughout the meeting too. So I want to talk about today, since the first meeting for a lot of you, is like, why stories? Like, why do stories even matter? Like, what's the point of telling stories? Because it's really the business we're in. We're in the business of publishing books, right? And whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's really about telling stories and sharing stories. And as I was a kid, I used to read these big, giant science fiction fantasy novels, like 1,000 page novels, like the Wheel of Time series. And I loved it. There was something about just being a kid and just being so engrossed in a story, and to see yourself in the characters. Even though I was only 6 years old, I could fly with dragons, I could cast magic spells, or I could do all these things in my mind in the stories that I couldn't do as a 6-year-old kid who didn't really know how the world worked and didn't know how to, make it in the world, right? I was still learning and still growing up. And that's the power of stories, right? Because it gives you that freedom. It gives you that freedom to explore with your imagination. It gives you that freedom to experience things that you'd never be able to experience where you are in your life right now. And it's not just for fun, right? Because it is fun. It's so much fun being a great story, being a great movie, being a great book. It's a lot of fun. That's why people spend so much time reading books and watching movies. But it's so much more than that. It's so much more important than that, right? And if you think about it, if you think about the history of humans, stories are the first thing we recorded, right? In fact, you can go back to paintings on caves and caveman walls in 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years ago, pictures of animals, pictures of hunts. People were telling stories. Before there was even written language, people were telling stories and sharing stories. And so we have this massive tradition in our history of, humans sharing stories, oral tradition of, so people would gather around campfires and tell stories. And this happened for generation after generation after generation, tens and tens of thousands of years. And that's how we have the Bible. It's how we have many of the religions that we have came from stories. Many of our mythologies and traditions, it all came from stories. And so the question is, like, why do humans tell stories? Like, what's the point? Like, why have we been doing this for 50,000 plus years before we were doing much else with our lives in terms of building culture, before there were cities, before there was agriculture, before there were farms? People were telling stories. And I think it's because stories give life meaning, right? They do. Stories give life meaning. Because the truth is, life is hard. Life isn't easy. I know a lot of you have been through a lot of struggles, a lot of pain. I know I have. And stories are what help give us that meaning. They help us see where our place is in life, where our place is in the world. They help us see how our life matters, how our lives make a difference. Because the thing is, like, without meaning, life is pretty miserable as a human being. Right? Or think about it, like, we have our minds like going all the time, like, you're not good enough, you can't do it, why even try? Who do you think you are getting that job? Who do you think you are starting that business? Who do you think you are writing that book, telling that story? This is what we do to ourselves, like, all the time, right? And I think it's just part of being human. It's not like we try. It's not like we're trying to tear ourselves down. It's just part of being human, is we have to live with that self-consciousness. That's how our minds work. It's in some ways a curse, but it's also an incredible gift, right? And I think without meaning, life is just really tough. And so stories give our life meaning. And that's why humans have been telling stories for longer than recorded history. And so the stories that we tell and the stories that we publish at TCK Publishing, they help people see new meaning in their life, right? When you see a new story, you see new meaning. And I'll tell you a story in a little bit, and you'll see how that plays into your own life too. But it's not just that stories help people see new meaning in their life. They also do so much more. And that the meaning that people get from stories, it helps them solve some of the biggest problems and challenges in their lives and in the world. It makes a massive difference in people's lives. And the thing about stories is, it's subconscious, right? It's not like you listen to a good story and then you're like, oh, now I'm going to go do X, Y, Z. It's not like an instantaneous thing. it changes the meaning you receive to life. It changes the way you look at the world. And when the way you look at the world changes, you see new opportunities. You see new problems you can take care of. You see new opportunities to go after. You see new things you can do to make the world a better place. And I think, one of our core values here is making a difference. I know every single one of you here, you want to make a difference. You want to make the world a better place. And you do. The work you're doing makes the world a better place. The things you're doing for your families make the world a better place. And so that's why telling stories is so important, because it changes the way people look at the world. It changes the stories we tell. It changes the meaning we prescribe to life. And that determines how people act. And it's not the only thing. There's lots of things that change, the reasons people do things. But imagine, two people, the same human being, maybe they're twins. And one person has a story of, I'm not good enough. I can't do anything. The world's a hopeless, terrible, awful place. And the other person has a story of, well, I'm not that great, but I can get better and I can learn. And even though the world's a tough place, I can do my best to make it a little bit better. And imagine those same stories played out for a year and 5 years and 10 years and 50 years and a whole lifetime. And I know that those two people are going to have completely different lives just because of the different stories they're telling. So stories help us see as human beings, and the reason human beings tell stories, and as far as I know, other animals don't tell stories. So other animals communicate, like wolves and dolphins, lots of other animals, they communicate, they talk to each other, they have tribes, they have groups, they have families. You have complex lives just like we do, but they don't tell stories. Telling stories is a very human thing. It's unique to us. And stories help us see our place in this incredibly complex world we live in. The world we live in is incredibly complex. The human mind can't even begin to fathom the complexity of, our solar system, let alone the galaxy, let alone the, hundreds of billions of galaxies in the world, in the universe. It's a very complex place. And stories help us see our place, how, a little human being on a little tiny rock spinning around a sun is just one of, billions and billions of solar systems in our galaxy, with billions and billions of galaxies in the universe. We're this tiny little thing in the universe, but because of stories, we can see how we can make the world a better place, and how the part that we play is actually really important. And so I want to talk about today, I want to share with you today a story about dragons. All right, and dragons is one of the oldest myths ever, right? The earliest recorded creation stories come from Mesopotamia. It's like 10,000 years old. They were one of the first civilizations to develop agriculture in big cities, and the first to record stories, and their story is about a dragon. And so let's talk about dragons. Like, what is a dragon? A dragon is just this big, scary creature, right? It's gigantic, it's massive, it's bigger than anything you've seen. The other day I went out, I was in Mexico, and we went on a boat and saw some humpback whales. Humpback whales are one of the biggest creatures on the planet. They're massive. One of these whales jumped, and they kept jumping over and over, and one of them jumped on and waved its fin. The mama whale waved its fin like this, and its fin was bigger than me. I mean, the fin of the whale was bigger than I am. It was a beautiful thing to see. But dragons are even bigger than that. They're bigger than humpback whales. They're bigger than anything you can imagine. They're huge, right? And they're scary. And they're dangerous. They destroy towers, they destroy cities, they can kill entire armies of people, they breathe fire. Dragons are really scary. There's another interesting thing about dragons and stories is that dragons hoard treasure. They hoard gold. So when a knight goes and defeats a dragon, they get all the gold, they get the treasure. And what does that mean? Why would people tell this story for tens of thousands of years? And we've been writing down the story for 10,000 years, but it's probably been told for 50,000 or more years in oral tradition. And I think it's because dragons symbolizes something. A dragon has deep meaning to what it means to be human. And it means it's the thing you're afraid of. It's the problems in life. It's the challenges in life. It's the setbacks in life. And they're scary. They're hard. Life is challenging. And so dragons represent what's most terrifying in life. What's most scary. And when you confront a dragon, when you win, when you face your challenges in life, you are rewarded. You get the gold. And this gold isn't just money. It's not about money. It's about what matters to human beings, right? Because this story was told way before money existed, way before money existed. All right, this is way beyond that. It's about what it means to be human. It's when you face what you're afraid of, you get rewards in life. You get a happier family, better health, more meaningful work, more meaningful relationships. So that's why the story of the dragon is so important. And so I want to share with you a children's story about a dragon. And so I'm going to share my screen with you. And so just let me know if you guys can see the screen. Someone just pop up and let me know, make sure you can see. It says, "There's no such thing as a dragon." It's a children's book by Jack Kent. And originally this is like the audiobook narration by Patricia Krause, but I'm just going to read it for you to make sure you guys can hear, because I don't think you can hear it through my speakers. So just make sure, can you guys see the screen? Sarah, can everyone see?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Okay, sweet. Okay, so you guys can see, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you the story. There's no such thing as a dragon. Billy Bixby was rather surprised when he woke up one morning and found a dragon in his room. It was a small dragon, about the size of a kitten. The dragon wagged his tail happily when Billy patted its head. Just a cute little dragon. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother. "There's no such thing as a dragon," Billy's mother said, and she said it like she meant it. Billy went back to his room and began to dress. The dragon came close to Billy and wagged its tail, but Billy didn't pat it. If there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on the head. Billy washed his face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. Billy sat down at the table, and the dragon sat down on the table. This sort of thing was not usually permitted, but there wasn't much Billy's mother could do about it. She had already said there was no such thing as a dragon. And if there's no such thing, you can't tell it to get down off the table. Mother made some pancakes for Billy, but the dragon ate them all. Mother made some more, but the dragon ate those too. Mother kept making pancakes until she ran out of batter. Billy only got one of them, but he said that's all he really wanted anyway. Billy went upstairs to brush his teeth. Mother started clearing the table. The dragon, who was quite as big as Mother by this time, made himself comfortable on the hall rug and went to sleep. By the time Billy came back downstairs, the dragon had grown so much he filled the entire hall. Billy had to go around by way of the living room to get to where his mother was. "I didn't know dragons grew so fast," said Billy. "There's no such thing as a dragon," said Mother firmly. Cleaning the downstairs took Mother all morning, what with the dragon in the way and having to climb in and out of windows to get from room to room. By noon, the dragon filled the house. Its head hung out the front door, its tail hung out the back door, and there wasn't a room in the entire house that didn't have some part of the dragon in it. When the dragon awoke from his nap, he was hungry. A bakery truck went by. The smell of fresh bread was more than the dragon could resist. The dragon ran down the street after the bakery truck. The house went along, of course, like the shell on a snail. The mailman was just coming up the path with some mail for the Bixbys when their house rushed past him and headed down the street. He chased the Bixby's house for a few blocks, but he just couldn't catch it. When Mr. Bixby came home for lunch, the first thing he noticed was that his house was gone. Luckily, one of the neighbors was able to tell him which way it went. So Mr. Bixby got in his car and went looking for the house. He studied all the houses as he drove along. Finally, he saw one that looked familiar. Billy and Mrs. Bixby were waving from an upstairs window. Mr. Bixby climbed over the dragon's head, onto the porch roof, and through the upstairs window. "How did this happen?" Mr. Bixby asked. "It was the dragon," said Billy. There's no such thing, Mother started to say. There is a dragon, Billy insisted, a very big dragon, and Billy patted the dragon on the head. So I just want you to think about like what this story means to your life, and it's almost over, but how many times have you said to someone, maybe you worked in a job before where you told a boss, hey, there's a problem. There's something I'm afraid of. There's a challenge I have. There's something I'm dealing with, and it's a problem. And they just say, there's no dragon there. That's not a problem. You're just being silly. You know how and I'm sure if you've experienced that, you know how infuriating that is. It's like, it feels like the person is completely blowing you off. Like they don't get you at all. It's one of the most frustrating things I've ever experienced is when you say, hey, there's a dragon here, there's a problem, and everyone else thinks you're just crazy because it's not a problem. But to you, it is. And that's part of what being human means. It's a very subjective thing. We all see the world in a different way, right? And so one of the things I want to create here at TCK Publishing is to make sure that we all treat each other with that level of respect. So if someone says, hey, there's a dragon here, we don't treat you like you're crazy. We don't dismiss you. We say, hey, I see you see things differently. Now let's take a look at that and see what we can do about that. So the dragon wagged his tail happily. Then, even faster than it had grown, the dragon started getting smaller. The dragon wagged his tail happily. Oh, that went really fast. The dragon wagged his tail happily. Then, even faster than it had grown, it started getting smaller. Soon it was kitten size again. I don't mind dragons this size, said Mother. Why did it have to grow so big? I'm not sure, said Billy, but I think it just wanted to be noticed. So that's the story. There's no such thing as a dragon. And you'll notice how in this story, it started out as just a small little dragon. It was just a tiny little thing, size of a kitten, harmless, couldn't hurt anyone. And because no one paid any attention to it, it got worse. And so how many times have you had a problem in life where it's just a tiny little thing at the beginning? It's like, you get a little electricity bill. And you're like, oh, it's only a bill for a couple of dollars. It's not a big deal. You don't pay it. Next month, they add on a fee, and then add on another fee the next month, and then you keep ignoring it, and then your light goes off, right? And so problems get worse when we ignore them. And things that we fear get worse when we ignore them. And when we work together as a family, and we all acknowledge each other and respect each other, and we say, hey, I see when you say this dragon, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to work with you on that because I don't want you to be scared. I don't want you to be all alone. I don't want you to be afraid. So it's just a simple story, but I think the lessons from the simple story are profound, and it makes life meaningful for human beings. And it makes it meaningful to work in a company. I mean, I'm sure some of you have worked in companies before where there is no such thing as a dragon. People don't listen to you. They don't respect you. And that's absolutely not the culture we want to create here. I want everyone to feel listened to and respected and understood. And like we're all working together to solve the big dragons, the big important challenges together as a team.